What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Jeremy Haun. Welcome to the show,
Hey man, how's it going?
man. It's good. It's fun. I got to hop on a show with you. Oh, probably was a year ago. With Todd and them from Comic Burrito. Well, it was
Hmm?
in the midst of Haunthology Kickstarter.
Yeah, so we're closer to 2 years ago then.
Wow, is it been that
Yeah,
long?
yeah, it's been a minute, but time flies, right?
Right? It's and so no, it was a fun time. We talked about things that we love, comics, and we talked about old fashions, and it was a good time. And just recently saw you in person at over at C2E2, which was a fun
Yeah,
con.
an equally good time, right?
Yeah, as always. So, Matt, I'm excited to talk to you about comics. You've been working on a lot of great stuff. We mentioned Haunthology. You're behind Red Mother. You just finished up the first 5 issues of The Approach with Boom Studios. Um, you've been doing a lot of great comics, and I want to talk about all those comics. But I always like to know, like, did you have a love for comics growing up as a kid, or is this something you came into later in life?
No, it's always been there. When I was really young, my mom, who was a single mother, worked in a little drugstore, and there was a spinner rack there. And Charlie, the guy that ran the store, this old guy, he felt badly that she had this poor little rat kid, right?
Yeah.
So when they would tear off the covers of the comics from the spinner rack,
Mhm.
he was supposed to destroy them. He would turn in the covers, but he would give me all these coverless comics. So from the time that I was probably 3 years old, I had comics of some sort in my life.
That's that's so cool. Do you still have any of those coverless comics from your childhood, or are they kind of
No,
found
no,
their
I think
way in?
between me and I've got a brother that's 2.5 years younger than I am, and then another brother that's 10 years younger than I am. So between the three of us, you know,
Yeah.
not even my favorite comics didn't really, like even the ones that I bought later often didn't survive because of the three of us just voraciously reading.
I mean, I get it. My comics all turned into coverless comics eventually because I read them front and back all the time, and so I don't even have these like iconic covers I didn't even recognize because they had fallen off. And like, what was the Todd McFarlane one with Batman? The Todd McFarlane Batman one. I read that Batman issue front and back, and then finally when I was hunting for it, like as a collector, I was like, oh, I know the story. I could
Right.
I could write it.
Right.
So
Well, yeah, that's kind of funny because it's like there were several comics that I read the story and loved. There was specifically some of my very first comic book memories. There was an issue of it was Action Comics for Superman, but basically where Superman was fighting the parasite. They were out over the water, and there were all these buoys. They're just beating each other up, and forever I didn't even know what the cover of that any of those looked like because they
right.
were comics. But I loved the stories.
It's so good. So you grew up getting into comics, it sounds. And then where was this switch of like, you write, if people aren't familiar with this stuff, you're a writer, you're also an artist, like, so you are well versed in, creating comics. Where was it for you? Or like, this is something that I want to start to kind of pursue as a career.
I kind of terrified that same mother with wanting to do this forever.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know that I ever really. I mean, I'm 47 years old, so we're talking about in the late 70s, early 80s. Um, I didn't really understand where these things came from or what
Yeah.
they were like, but I wanted to tell stories, and I always told stories. I regularly would write and draw things just in books stapled together, pieces of paper, that sort of thing. I was always sort of emulating the process of making stories. I I didn't growing up the way that we did,
Yeah.
or in the Midwest, I don't know that I really understood that I was ever going to really be able to do this.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I didn't really ever leave it as, an option not to, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's kind of just it's always been there, but you didn't know you could. And so, as you are starting to progress and and figuring out that this is a path, where was it where you're like, we're able to start to put pen to paper and like to start to get stuff out there and get it into the world of comics?
Um, I went to college. I was lucky enough to get an art scholarship to go
Nice.
to a small. I mean, it's a local college. We're not talking about going to art school or anything super cool. But I was very lucky at that school to have some fantastic instructors, people that saw potential in what I was doing. Um, they wanted me to make some kind of art. It wasn't always the kind of art I necessarily wanted to make, but I learned a lot of those fundamentals there. And um, my what would have been my fifth year, my would have been my senior year of college, um, they sort of told me that I needed to buckle down and kind of get serious about things and stop messing with this comic book thing. And I did not like that. You know, I don't like being told that I can't do the thing that I like. And so they basically said, hey, you know, you're on scholarship. You need to start doing actual graphics work and really focusing on those things. And I'm sure that in their head they saw it as a tough love moment. They were trying to get me to
Yeah.
do what I was supposed to do to survive. But they did that. And I, you know, they said basically you're not gonna get the scholarship if you can, you know. So because I was an entitled little turd, I basically said, okay, well, I'm going to take all of the art that wasn't comics related out of my portfolio and only put comics work in there. And I threw away the essay that I'd written about, you know, kind of looking at the world in a magical way,
Yeah.
and completely wrote the essay about, you know, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, we keep saying this, what is a comic book that has several images per page? And you know, it was a very impassioned thing. I was like, you know, I'm gonna show you all. And so I turned it in, and I didn't get the scholarship. And so rather than going to college for my senior year, I left. But that lit a fire under me that I hadn't previously ever had. I had to, you know, I had made comics and worked on stuff, and you know, obviously during college was sort of doing that. But like, I was like, nope, this is what I'm going to do. People told me no, so I definitely am going to make a point to do it. And from there, I just started pushing and working on stuff, working with friends, trying to just figure stuff out.
I I that's why I love to ask these questions about, as a comic creator, we love a good origin story. And I love a good comic creator origin story of, kind of rubber meets the road, right? You're like, no, this is what I want to do. And just because people say I can't, I'm gonna do this. Like that's such a I love it. I love it.
Well, I think that, you know, it's very easy as a creative to look at other people
Mhm.
that make things. You know, we're always comparing ourselves. We're looking at it saying, "Oh, this person," you know, I mean, your entire life as a writer or an artist, you're looking at other people and going, "These people are genius. I wish that I could do that. I wish I was that good. I wish it was so effortless." Um, for me, it was just about like, you know, I was going to tell stories the best way that I could, and nobody was going to stop me from doing that. You know, if I was, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm here with you right now and in like a great place. You know, I'm working on books that I want to work on the way that I want to work on them.
Yeah.
Um, I would be doing that even if I wasn't getting paid to do it. If it was not my career, if I was still, you know, stocking shelves at a grocery store late into the night, I would draw comics on my days off. You know,
Yeah.
that's just how it is for me.
Yeah. I feel like that's you've got to have a passion for the art form, to be in comics and a love for comics because it sounds like it's tough, from all the interviews I've done and stuff, but it's so there's got to be that passion and drive, like you said, like even if I wasn't doing this as a career, I'm going to still be doing this. So
Well, I think that there's sometimes on the outside of it, you know, taking back to whenever I was that kid, not understanding how these things were made. You're sitting there and you're going, oh, you know, well, this is, you know, you get to do what you want, right? I mean, it's again, it's a place of privilege making these things. I do appreciate the
Yeah.
idea that I get to, wake up at noon and stumble out to my studio, in my pajamas and drink coffee, watch movies, and draw. That's a great life. But the thing I think that and kind of what you hit on there is like we sit, alone in these rooms for hours and hours every day. I'm on a hard deadline right now, and I'm probably working about 15 hours a day. That's not great for your back or
Right.
your sleep schedule or your physical health, and like you're probably eating crappy food just to keep going, a lot of sugar just to kind of get that little buzz back so you
Mm,
can hopefully not jitter your way through too many lines. But it is hard to make these things,
right.
but it is a passion. It is a thing that we are devoted to. And, ultimately, look, I'm telling these stories for me, but I'm also telling these stories for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And where these stories, because like I said, we've mentioned that you write, you do art. um where do all these stories come from? Do you have like, how do you get inspired to write a story, to say like, this, I want to try and take this idea and put it onto paper and make a comic out of it?
Lots of opium. I just do that, and then I just lay. I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, uh, it's like the terrifyingly romanticized ideal of
Right.
creativity. Uh, you know, um, I mean, I think you become a sponge, right? You look at the
Yeah.
things around you, the world around you. You're having conversations with your friends or with your family, your kids, or you read things, and you just become this sponge that sort of soaks up all of the weird stuff. And then you run it through a filter that's very personal. All of the stories that I write are kind of me sort of dealing with a thing or wanting to talk about, so much creativity is a story is the big idea, but
Right.
then what makes it special is the stuff that is behind that. You tell a story about an alien invasion, but it's actually about someone dealing with understanding um, aging, or whatever that particular thing is. Uh, you know, uh, I mean, I'm literally, I'm literally writing this 2-issue Black Adam thing for DC right now, part of the big Night Terrors line.
Yeah.
Um, and they're dealing with their nightmares, right? The things
Yeah.
that scare them. And there's like that, but I'm in it. I'm telling a DC story, but I'm also talking about the fact that no matter how, as especially as men, we want to pretend there are in fact things that we are scared of,
Right.
and and how personal those things can be. Even if you're an uh, pretty much eternal, you know, superhero charged with the abilities of the gods, kind of thing.
Right.
You still have fear.
Mhm.
You just don't want to admit it. And so,
Yeah.
so I think that that's a thing for me, is like always trying to find the story within the story, the thing that's the personal aspect. And the
Yeah.
more that I've understood that, the better I think stories have gotten for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, it seems to be, as someone who's read, you know, Red Mother, Haunthology, the approach of, and then even you're talking about what you're working with Black Adam coming up, that you like to deal in the world of horror, but from an idea of, like you said, personal stories to it. Like, the monsters and like the scary stuff is almost like a side character in the main story of what you're trying to get to,
Right.
of telling the story. And I think that's such a cool thing to see.
Well, I think that we all have universal experiences. I mean, my favorite kind, especially like within horror, my favorite kind of story is when let's say you've got a couple and they are driving across country, and you realize that they're going to have a baby together, but they're driving across country and they're going to split up. Like that's what, like this drive is them actually saying we're done in this relationship, right? They have a blowout, they end up in a field, and some terrible creatures out there in the tall grass. Okay. I like the idea that I'm pissed off that I have to now stop learning about whether these people are going to break up or not because this monster shows up. I like the idea, and look, and I'm all about big set pieces and plot and stuff going on. I love crazy moments, but I want to know about those people. I want to know, are they going to break up? I want to know, you know, are they going to be okay? What about, this kid that they're going to have? That's the important stuff to me.
Yeah. Well, it comes across in your writing, from the idea of that those are big key set pieces. I one of the Haunthology, we've mentioned it, we haven't really talked about too much of what it is. It's a collection of stories, and there's one that has stuck out with me ever. Well, because I swear it's you're drawing you in the book. And it's just like it looks like a regular like Saturday morning or something, like, oh, we're just gonna get a cup of coffee. Sounds like, hey, let's go out on the porch. And it just like, and the world is, you just see like the world is just in shambles and just a cluster all around. But it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, we still have our relationship and we're gonna be living in the midst of that.
Well, I mean, that's the thing for me. Like, so for viewers, listeners, Haunthology is a collection of 28 short stories that I did during the pandemic. Um, we went pencils down as an industry. I mean, what was it? April 2020, we realized that everybody kind of had to stop for a while. If we were going to be able to salvage the comics industry, we couldn't just keep making stuff for like in an indeterminate amount of time and shipping it to shops. That would have killed shops. It just would have been terrible. So we went pencils down, and I obsessively create. That's kind of like my therapy.
Mm.
Is the page, right? Like me sitting down, whether I'm writing a story or drawing something, it's me getting that stuff out. We went pencils down, right? We
Right.
stopped. So I had to find an outlet, and the answer for that was telling these short stories.
Mm.
Because there's stories that you think of, there's little moments, little vignettes, things that you want to talk about, but you don't have an opportunity because comic stories are what, 5 issues
Right.
usually, and you don't really get small chunks. And I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to tell these. I'm going to sort of put them out there and we'll see what happens. People responded well to it. They liked it. And then I decided I was going, well, I'm going to collect this. And then I was like, well, I'm going to do a big Kickstarter and make it fancy and pretty and, I mean, we were in the worst time as far as the stress of the world around us. But I got to build this thing, and I got to build it specifically with you all, with a community
Yep.
of amazing people. I got to talk to directly to fans and learn about their lives while I'm making this thing. And you know, it was one of the hardest, I mean, maybe the hardest place that we ever were as a world.
Yeah.
But there was, we still screwed up and still we're humans are asses, but I feel like as a community, a lot of us really came together and really figured out how to share in special things. And for me, that was, making this and putting it out there for you all was a truly special, life-saving thing.
Yeah. And what I appreciated, I think I mentioned this to you at C2E2, is that like you can tell you are a fan of comics and like appreciate the like because if y'all haven't gotten to hold this book up, it is beautiful. It's, I mean, the logo and everything, the how it's collected, how it presents, like you took your time and creating something that's going to look good for people to really appreciate. And I think that as a collector, I'm like, I love that. And like the stickers and things like that, like it was really well crafted. And yeah,
Thanks.
so props.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I I think maybe part of it was growing up as poor as we did, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, we grew up without anything. And so I really became very fascinated with collecting and like why, it wasn't even always like, I didn't always have to necessarily keep it in this perfect condition. I already talked about that. My
Yeah.
brothers and I read the covers all
Right.
the time. But like things, especially things relating to stories, were very important to me. I would record hours and hours and hours of TV on VHS tapes just to watch over and over again. Those weren't special items necessarily, but they were these artifacts of a specific time. You'd end up with like commercials on there from some weird, point. You're watching USA Up All Night or something like that.
Right.
You got like weird commercials and then weird horror movies and all these things. And, um, like little, you know, little collectibles, things that like, my grandfather, I remember, had this jar of like old radio tubes. I was
Mhm.
obsessed with those. It became about like things that were really cool to me, and I wanted, and I wanted to build some sort of element into the stories that I tell, and the way that I create things that not only told the story in the book itself, but went to another level. It sort of became an artifact of that world, of that specific time it was made. And that's what I was able to do with this project. Like you said, the stickers and the pins. And I literally was like, I wrote a story about which I'm actually going to tell more about later in another story, but where these weird coins are a form of currency in a real life game that people are playing, right? You can go and you can kind of buy your way into a room or whatever it is with one of these coins. And I literally worked with Shire Post Mint, this amazing coin maker in Northwest Arkansas, and handmade these beautiful coins. You know, you don't often get to do weird stuff like
Right.
that. And this was that chance for it for me. It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Well, that's what I love about Kickstarter was allowing creators to, in the midst of a shutdown, of still having a way to, create an outlet and do different things. And I think it allowed you all to explore different things too and try stuff uniquely. Because I remember seeing those pictures of the updates of the coin being pressed and things, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
It's just, I don't know, like, I think we're also trying to figure out how to make this industry work. And truth be told, I feel like that we all together have a lot of work to do to make it better. I think it's on creatives and publishers and shops and fans all working together. We got to stop being such little like pains in the ass and blaming everybody else for what's wrong with something.
Right.
We need to understand that we have to continue to build something special.
Mhm.
We have to then put our money and our time and our energy where our mouths are and say, I'm going to give you something that is experiential on as many levels as possible. I want, look, how many stories did you read as a kid that you think about to this day? I want to give people an opportunity with the things that I'm making, the things I'm talking about, to maybe you'll think about that years from now. You'll be like, oh wow, that's a
Yeah.
weird situation. Oh, like I remember this story. And like that's what creativity is.
Mhm.
and the truth of it is that, not to get too dark, but like life's fleeting, right? Like we're not, we're gonna eventually be gone.
Right.
But these stories, they go on, and the idea that, even a dumb story about, you know, a guy finding a toilet in the apocalypse can actually maybe make somebody laugh or affect them or whatever it is.
Yeah. No, it's true, and I like that idea, and I love that, you know, that's how Haunthology was able to be an outlet for that. I want to ask you a little bit about because you just wrapped up issue 5, what, a month ago of the approach, or it came out in shops, what, a month, 2 months ago of the approach.
Yeah.
If someone hasn't gotten to check that out from Boom, what was the elevator pitch of that story?
A story about a Midwestern airport that gets stuck. Everybody gets stuck there in a snow and ice storm. Happens a lot. I live here in the Midwest,
Yep.
Missouri. We get a lot of ice, and people have to divert, and they're stuck there overnight. The power goes out, and then a plane crash lands on the tarmac, and they go out, and they think that they might be able to get a survivor out, but instead they get out something terrible. And it's a survival story about people trying to get through a stormy, icy night in an airport. And it's one of my favorite kinds of horror stories. I think about a lot of my favorite like kinds of stories are isolationist stories. There's an episode of the X-Files called Ice, where they're trapped in an Arctic station and there's something wrong, and they're all stuck in this little building, and you can't go outside, you can't get away from it. I love those. I love The Thing, all these stories about kind of people trapped in bad situations. I mean, at its heart, it's kind of like you know at least in the beginning, like Alien meets uh, a terrible ice storm, I guess.
Set in a Die Hard 2 world of an
Exactly. Let's do that. Let's do it's Alien meets Die Hard meets ice.
Yes, it's so good. But again, it's a fantastic story, gang. And if you look at it, you got you have the things that happen, but it is a lot about the characters who are in the book too, and their growth and their relationships with each other in that time frame. And again, just excuse me, really well crafted from that standpoint. That was that's co-written, right? Because with Jason.
Yeah, Jason Hurley, who is was my writing partner on The Beauty,
Yeah.
and we did this. Both Jason and I live here in Joplin, and we met at the comic shop and just became, lifelong friends,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Now having written so much stuff together over so many years, we just it's that perfect meeting of a friendship and creativity, and we both write a lot on our own and we make things, but having each other there in those moments writing stuff, first of all, it's just easy. It's like a thing where like we call each other out on our stupid shit, right? Like we're like, I don't know, like that's like like specifically, there are times where like I'll write something and I'll like look, because we write in the same room, this room, and I'll look up and he'll be like, oh God, and I'll be like, what? And he's like, that is the stupidest line I've ever heard in my life, and I'm like, it kind of works. And then he's like, well, yeah, but do it like this, and then it sounds right, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's
Yes.
so much better. You're right. And I think that having that relationship, that ability to bounce things off of one another, but also to like ramp things up. He and I both have a ridiculous love of horror, and um, he he's an extra special case in he loves horror, but he also goes in these deep dives of like research on stuff.
Mm.
So, he'll watch like I I personally want to murder him about halfway through it, but like he'll be like, I'm gonna watch every Christmas movie that there is, over the month. And so he'll watch like 5 Christmas movies a day over the holidays and stuff like that. And so we have these touchstones of like, oh, well, this is a thing,
Yeah.
but we don't do it like that. Like, but like this is a kind of a cool little element, or like, oh, like we'll have an idea and it'll be like, yeah, well, that's kind of like this. And it's like, well, then let's turn it on our heads. And I think that's the lifelong love of horror. It's you take because look, every story has also been sort of told in some fashion.
Right.
So it's up to us to make it a personal experience and run it through the filter of the way that we tell things.
Mm. Yeah. So, because that one, you have a different artist on it, but you did the artwork on the beauty, right? When you guys were doing.
I did the first arc of the beauty, and
Okay.
then I did. So I did all of the cover. I typically, if I'm writing a book, I'm gonna try to do the covers for it.
Okay.
If I'm allowing. So I did all the covers on the beauty. I did all the covers, the A covers on, like we get guest cover artists and stuff like that. But which is a wonderful thing because you can get such brilliant people working on stuff. But we did. I did all the covers on the approach and the beauty, and then I drew the first arc of the beauty. I did an issue like mid story, and then I did part of the last issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you, as someone who does both of writing and art, is it hard to let go of that part sometimes when you're not doing the art since you've done art on comics so much more, or is it hard to separate, I guess is what I'm saying.
Um, you know, I mean, first of all, writers like, there's always that writers be like this, artists be like this thing. So I'm going to do a little bit of both really quick. Artists are pains in the ass. The truth of it is we're just pains in the ass. By the way, writers are also pains in the ass, right? Uh, one of the gifts about doing both is sort of understanding what the other does and valuing that. I think like I've now close to I think that I've written more stories that have been drawn by somebody else than I have for myself at this
Okay.
point. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to continue writing, and especially now my canned response when somebody's like, "Hey, do you want to do something?" I'm like, "Do I get to write and draw it?" And they're like, "Yes," or they're like, "No," and then that decides what that's
Right.
the deciding factor for it. But the stuff that I've written for other people, I've been honored to work with that talent, that
Yeah.
much talent. And I try to respect that talent. I try to treat the scripts that I write. I want to write something that I would want to draw, but I also want to write something that's done with, respect to the fact that somebody else is spending a lot of time and energy making this thing. Making comics in its best form is a beautiful collaboration. It's people that like making things and like telling stories, getting excited by that collaboration. If I send a script, I really hope that like the artist is like, oh my gosh, oh, I can't wait to draw this part. And if I'm drawing something, I like that I can send those pages and have the writer get that excited about the thing that I'm sending. So it's a lot of fun. So yeah, no, I try not to be too precious or I don't know, dickish about it. Like I try to, I don't want to ever do anything where I'm stifling
Yeah.
someone else's creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, do you gravitate towards one or the other, or now because it makes it sound like you're kind of like you want to do both?
Yeah. My career started out like, I think back to being that little kid sitting at the table with those torn off
Mm.
covered comics, right? I didn't distinguish between writing and drawing. I just told stories. I
Yeah.
wrote out terribly spelled sentences and drew pictures underneath them. And, it was part of the process. But you spend so much of your career trying to be a specific thing for specific people until you realize, wait a minute, I just want to do these things the way, I want to do it with that beauty and innocence that I had in the beginning. And getting to do that is its own kind of magic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're talented on both. I absolutely adore your art. And gang, if you don't follow Jeremy online, one of my favorite things you do is you do sketches and that you post on Twitter and stuff of like just different characters and things, and they look so good.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that a lot. I am behind on those because of my workload right now.
What, you can't work 15 hours a day and then also do fun sketches for us? Come on.
Oh my gosh. Well, what my favorite thing about that was doing those. I call them so it started I do a thing called 31 Days of Halloween, which is Inktober, but it's just my doing it my way, which I draw monsters all the month of October. But then I was like, oh, I really love doing this. And people like you were like, hey, this is great. Give us more. So then I did a thing called Pop 21. And so in 2021, every week I would do a couple, three or whatever it was, pieces. And then I did some in 22. And now this year I Pop 23. But yeah, those were a thing where I would sit down with my family and we'd watch, Mandalorian or Last of Us or whatever we're watching. And I would draw while we were sitting on the couch, basically. I was not at the drawing table, but I was drawing table adjacent. And it was nice. It was kind of a therapeutic thing for me. It kept me going, kept me able to focus on writing and drawing other things. When I get into deep deadline mode, though, I can't do that other stuff. I really, and I don't know why, but currently, artist Jeremy hates writer Jeremy because there's stuff that I drew that I wrote into Black Adam into this story where I'm like, oh yeah, he's traversing a world that consists of a massive crazy nightmare thing. Oh, buildings from this place mixed with these strange things, and while earlier I said like I really try to be nice to the artists that I work with. The caveat is accept me. I'm
Yeah.
like screw you. You're gonna do what I want you to do. So I these vast landscapes and stuff like that. So I don't have time to be doing that right now, but thank you, and I'm glad you dig them, and I
Yeah.
will get back to it just as soon as I'm able to, shower, sleep a little bit.
It's funny that like, whenever I have a artist and writer combo on, they do it. I hear that all the time. Like Kyle Starks just said the same thing recently. He's like, I never would ask someone to do 12 panels of fighting, but when I'm writing, darn it, I'm gonna do it. Like I'm gonna make it painful for me, but
Oh yeah, yeah. I today wrote a page, and because I was wanting a specific effect, Black Adam goes into this thing, and what he runs into, I really wanted this very specific staccato build of the horror.
yeah,
What he's seeing and how he's reacting to it, and then you see what it is, and you see him react to it. It's a 9-panel page. It's not like a 9-panel cool grid like Tom King and Mitch Garrett's too. But it's a 9-panel page, and I'm like, God, why am I doing this to myself? I'm doing this to myself because I love it, because it's gonna look cool.
It's gonna look awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to looking at that panel and going, oh, you you hated yourself for us, but it looks awesome.
Thanks, man.
So, well, I want to be respectful of your time as always. We've talked about approach and hauntology. Two things: where can people find you and what you're working on to stay up to date? And is there other stuff that that you haven't gotten to talk about that you're working on that you want to plug?
I mean, so we talked about Haunthology. The hardcover edition of the Kickstarter is out and has been fulfilled. So everybody has, except for in a couple of weird cases where stuff got shipped back because of whatever. But like everybody has those. I have a few copies of the hardcover book, like what's up on his shelf right there, left in my online store. So you can just go to jeremyhaun.com. Just my name, easy peasy. Jeremyhaun.com. And you can find that. I also have all the extra bonus stuff in there that he was talking about, stickers and enamel pins, the weird coins, all of that stuff's on there too. But also, and this is where it gets really cool, say that, you're not a hardcover person. Say that, the deluxe edition is not something that you can afford or have, I respect that.
Yeah.
We just, a couple weeks ago, released the softcover edition. It's kind of stripped down. It's smaller, more regular comic size of Haunthology via Image Comics. So you can go to your local shop. If your local shop does not have it, because stocking stuff is not always easy. There are so many books. Shops can't always support everything the way that I know that they would love to. Just ask your local retailer. Say, hey, Haunthology, this thing from Image, they can get that for you. Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, gang. So check out your website. I'll have links below. And it sounds like you've got trade coming out for Approach in the summer, I assume.
Yeah, that's going to be in August, I believe. That's coming out. And I've talked about Knight Terror's Black Adam for DC. That issue 1 comes out July, maybe it's a holiday. I keep wanting to say July 4th. Comes out in July.
Okay.
Issue 2 comes out in August. So yeah, it's going to be a busy summer for me and stuff coming out. But it's going to be cool as hell.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for taking some time. Gang, if you haven't gotten to check out any of the books we talked about, go online, go to comic book store, pre-order Black Adam, do all that stuff. Like, you're not going to be disappointed. So, all the links we talked about are going to be in the description of this video, or if you're listening to the podcast, check that description as well. But Jeremy, thank you for taking some time to talk about comics with me.
Oh man, I always love talking to you. It's great seeing you at C2E2.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna keep making stuff. So why don't you keep doing what you're doing too, and then we'll just talk more.
Sounds good. We'll keep the conversations going. So with that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.
Thanks.